A very long time ago, Sony decided to put rootkits in its CDs. Rootkits are a type of hacking tool that gives the person who created the rootkit the ability to hack into your computer and figure out everything about you. People who find out that someone else has put a rootkit on your system can then hack into your system using that other person's method of entering your system and stealing information. And those malicious actors can hack you. It's a kind of a forgotten piece of why the fuck should Sony get any of my money. A lot of people remember like Sony being hacked or Sony doing this and Sony doing that, but rootkits, that's like the 90s. That's like Celene Dion level, like late 90s, early 2000s era type bullshit. As time moves on, the sheer clusterfuck, like the sheer amount of clusterfucks that big corporations build up in their history can result in people forgetting that the company that made the CD popular decided to hack people at random using CDs. Right? Slowly introduce rootkits in various CDs. So people would become vulnerable because Sony didn't want people to copy their music. Literally. Sony used hacking tools as a form of DRM, an experimental form of DRM. The company that popularized the CD, the company that's dominated the console wars for so long that literally kicked out Xbox drove itself into extinction, and now it's Sony and Nintendo, and Sony's just copying Nintendo. So the only remaining viable console company out there, realistically, because who the hell's gonna spend money on the Switch 2? Who's gonna want to spend money on the Switch 2? And $80 for Mario Kart or whatever. Sony, the only remaining AAA third person single player experience company out there with a controller, single player experience with a controller, console company out there, once decided to put rootkits in the CDs, and nobody really suffered any consequences from it. No one went to jail for applying spyware to countless computers around the world. Nobody ever saw any jail time for this. But around that same time, politicians wanted to see people pirating music serve time, or companies wanted people to pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars for pirating things as a form of punishment, as a form of making an example out of things. So I gotta say, in a world where judges can make an example out of people, arbitrarily raise people's punishments for political purposes, where there are not enough laws to ban judges from applying, throwing the book at someone, applying an undue punishment on someone who is guilty, where guilty people just don't have the rights that innocent people have, and people who have controversial opinions become guilty by the virtue of some politician decided to lie about Southport, and blamed an entire group of people of doing something that they're not doing. I'm talking about Keir Starmer lying about his political opponents sending people to Southport to do rioting, when people on the ground, cops, said no, the closest the farthest someone was from Southport was 12 miles. That's Keir Starmer doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. And like for half a year pushed for free speech suppression, in this sort of a world, like where politicians are subordinate to companies and companies are subordinate to people's political attitudes, and political attitudes are subordinate to investor attitudes, and investor attitudes are subordinate to activist culture. And activist culture, specifically the most vapid activist culture, from people who come from families that support them when they go do, and it's the only viable way to become a part of Hollywood or gaming or the book industry. Like, the salaries are not enough for someone who doesn't have support from home to go to a place and live their lives and develop their own ideas. When companies can put spyware on your devices and potentially make you vulnerable for identity theft, and they never get punished, where does that leave us? What happens if someone in Sony decides, well, I think our PlayStation needs more information about you, and then they make you give their console access to your phone data or your PC data if you want to play a game on your PC or something. At least in Nintendo's shitification is about, well, we want to monitor like people in chat rooms because there's a lot of kids. At least Nintendo has an excuse for its behaviors, whereas Sony is gonna 1 minute tell you all about Linux and then change its mind at the very last second, and then what? Like randomly change the rules on everyone and just expect you to be fine with it. This was just a rant. I'm just tossing out things to think about. I don't really have a specific point here. I'm just tossing around things that I'm thinking about right now. Fucking dystopia.